Yes, sir. The August 23rd work session is starting at 5:02. Mayor Mark Sukup.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Brett Hansen.
Here.
Councilmember Lisa Lake.
Here.
Councilmember Robert Oxmacher.
Present.
Councilmember Luke Wagner.
Here.
Okay. Who's going to take over there first? Is it you, Lisa, or is it? And could you introduce your guest?
Yes, we engage with Employers Council to do a compensation study on all of our positions within the town. And Diana Portillo-Berger will be here to present, and then Jen Vollmer with HR will present our implementation plan for specifically Timnath. So, and then we'll be available for questions if you have any at the end.
And it's Janet?
Diana.
Diana, I'm sorry.
Diana. That's okay.
Shows how bad my ears are.
That's okay.
And Diana, before you start, I thought your written presentation was excellent. So thanks
thank you.
for doing something that's readable. I got questions, but it's only because I'm not smart enough to understand it.
It is compensation, so I understand. So do we project or wasn't sure? Yeah. Okay, so sorry, I have to speak up. So as I said, I'm part of Employers Council. It's been around since 1939. We have a little over 200 employees, and we help with human resources and any employment law in Denver, Colorado, and Utah area, in Arizona too. Sorry, the way the compensation project works is usually Timnath contact Employers Council, and we identify the market. We did some matching between your jobs and the markets of the jobs, and then we review your structure, we updated the structure, and then we compare the employees against the new structure, and then we made recommendations. So this basically the process. We identify the market has been Northern Colorado or all Front Range for some of the positions. We use some of the surveys from Employers Council. We could generate our own surveys, but the ones that we used for this study was the benchmark compensation and public employers, and the CML, where we used 10 specific municipalities that were closer to the similar population of Timnath. And the job matching process is the longest of the compensation project, where we are literally looking at every single job description, figuring out the duties, the qualifications, the experience, and then matching it with some other jobs similar to the market. And then Timnath goes in and reviews the matches, makes sure that I match correctly, accounting 1 to accounting 2 or whatever it was. And after that, we gather the market data. And from there, we create the salary structures. With the salary structures, Timnath decided to do a combination structure, which is the market data and his percentage spread. Previously, Timnath had only a spread. But with this, it actually helps clarify it and makes easier conversations between potential employees and future or current employees.
Diana,
It also.
Would you prefer that we ask questions at the end, or as you go along?
It doesn't matter. If you have a question right now, I can answer it.
Okay. I mean, is that okay? Okay. So switch to a job range structure. I don't understand that.
Okay, so compensation, a job range structure means that each job has a structure. It says the minimum to pay an accountant can be $25,000. The midpoint, which is usually market, can be 50. I'm making up the numbers.
Yeah.
And then the maximum can be 75,000.
So at that rate, we're way overpaying, Lisa. Just kidding, Lisa.
So that's what it means. We can have a grade structure where we combine bunch of grades and bunch of jobs in one grade. But because Timnath only has a few jobs, we were able to do one job per structure. So each job has its own ranges. That's what it means.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Good question, though. See, this is what happens when you know compensation. You assume everyone knows compensation. And also making this way, the structure it created, it was able to have a wider spread for employee progression too. And it's a common method when it's a small organization too. So the police officer structure, it was actually implemented before Employers Council came in. I just reviewed it and there was nothing wrong. It was a great structure. Timnath plays well beyond the market in northern Colorado. The steps match what it is in the market already. So it's everything aligned within market. There's nothing wrong with it. I was like, good job, Lisa.
All right, another question, a
Sure.
definitional question. What's non-post and post?
Oh, that is the certification for the police officers.
Certification, so once.
One
okay,
is the
so like
entry
a
level.
non-post to be somebody that's learning the
Mhm.
process, and post is the guys that have been around
Yeah,
a while. Okay.
non-post is like entry level right out of the
Okay,
academy.
thank you.
Okay. And then now for the market pricing results, which is the other 25 positions that Timnath has that are non-step jobs. The average comp ratio for all the employees was 102%, which is, the comp ratio is a compensation term, which means the salary divided by the midpoint, which is the medium of the market. And so once again, Timnath pays very well. There's 14 employees that are below the midpoint, and 3 of them are over 10%. And so I noted this because it's kind of an irregularity with Timnath. So I wanted to point it out and make sure that it's reviewed based on the employee circumstances. It could be that the employee is a new employee or has a performance issue or something, or is new to the job and doesn't have all the qualifications. Yes.
So what's a not, identify specifically what a non-step employee is, like who?
Someone who is not a police officer, basically.
Oh, okay. So anyone that's not a police officer is a non-step employee?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. And for future recommendations, we recommended 4% for merit increases, 2% for wage market adjustments. This is an additional one because of all the COLA talk has been going on, inflation and all of that. So it's an additional recommendation. And also we suggest that they review the jobs again to make sure the Timnath stays in a competitive with the market. Any other questions?
I do have a question about, I'm sorry, Lisa.
Oh, go ahead.
About the wage market adjustment in COLA. I know, we're hearing, between 4.5% and 6% inflation nationwide over the past year. And the recommendation here is 2%. Where does that figure come from, and how does it compare to some of these other figures that we're getting?
So the 2% actually came from Employers Council did a survey, and it hasn't finished being public yet, but it said about 33% of the employers in Colorado were thinking about 1 to 2% increase, and 15 to 20, 18%, they said no increase of additional COLA. So that's where the number is coming from. And a lot of my colleagues and mentor that I have at Employers Council, they actually don't recommend to have a big increase and match it to inflation, because then what happens when inflation goes down? Are you going to take away the wages from the employees? That's usually how it doesn't work. So, and it will decelerate. We don't know for sure, but based on the survey, that's what they were saying, which is why I recommended it. Does that answer your question?
Yes. It is rare that we see actual deflation, though. Is this a market wage adjustment recommendation for this year, or is that a recommendation for all years going forward?
Just for this year.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question about, so did you look at for these employees, did you look at time on the job with Timnath? And the reason I ask that is because thinking into the future as far as if we hire new employees, where we would hire them within that range and whether this is something we would have to continuously do. I know a lot of jobs do not hire at midpoint. You get hired much lower than that. So was that looked at as far as how long these employees have been with the town of Timnath?
Not under my plan or my project.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Just, I have a question. So when you say 102%, that's of the median, right?
Yes, the
Okay,
midpoint.
so it's not the top end, but it's
No,
the
no.
median.
So
Okay.
usually the comp ratio, it's always looking at the midpoint.
Perfect, thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right. Thank you, Diana. We have been working on this, you guys, for many, many months now. Erin, Lisa, myself, and Diana. She has been awesome to work with, and we appreciate her hard work in getting us where we needed to be for this project. I know she defined some things, but I just want to be clear just for a couple of the two new council members that may not know our process here. I know Councilman Wagner gave some great questions, so I want to address some of those. So STEP employees at the town of Timnath today are only police officers. I think she made that clear. I want to be clear on that. Those police officers in the STEP program have annual reviews on their hire date, their anniversary date. So every year on their anniversary date, they have a review. It's done by Chief and Sergeant Weinkoop. They get a review done. And then if they have met the criteria for the next step, at that point, they get moved up to that next step. If they haven't, then they work on that until the next one. Okay. For our non-step full-time employees, so that's everyone that's not a police officer, they are reviewed annually at the end of the year by their managers. That's typically how we've done it in the past here. That's how we're gonna, I guess, continue to do it at least this year. They are evaluated by their managers, and provided they get a glowing great review, which most of our, I think, employees will, and they're not on a performance improvement plan and everything looks great and they're moving forward and they're doing their job in a wonderful way, then we are proposing that 4% merit increase. If they're on a performance improvement plan, or if their work is not up to par or above standard, then of course we won't do a 4%.
Hey, Jen, so I'm bouncing ahead, but since you're sort of talking at this, so I think this matches what you're saying. So budgetary impacts 2023, the last page, which is 18.
Yep.
It says 2% market, 4% merit. And then it says 2% market. Is that a 2% above, or is that just splitting out the 2 and 4 of the 114?
No, the 114 is for your, those are for your non-step people, the 2 and 4. And that 4% is in there, assuming that we have 100%
Everybody
rate
gets
for,
it.
yeah.
Okay.
That's what that number is. The 2% below that is for those folks on the step plan, so that January 1, if they're on a step plan, January 1 of next year, they will get that 2%.
So who will be on the step plan?
The police department, the police officers, I should say, the police officers.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so the review process, I know that was a question. I hope we answered that.
Jen, can I jump in? So if they don't have right now, you said the proposals, if they have a glowing review, then they would get the 4%.
Mm-hmm.
What happens now? If they have glowing reviews, what number is that now?
Oh,
Or-
Well, it would have been last year.
Last year, thank you.
Yep.
Yep.
So last year we did reviews and it was 3 and 2, and I'm sorry, I don't remember. I think it was a 2% COLA and a 3% merit last year.
Okay.
And that was based on, we did some research with CML, Colorado Municipal League. I'm on their HR listserv, and this whole salary adjustment, COLA, cost of living, do we give raises and benefits and bonuses in the middle of the year, the end of the year at all? It's been a huge topic of conversation, as you can imagine. So we take a look at that. This year is great because we have the Employers Council compensation study to go off of, but in other years, we do our own research. CML releases a salary study every year. We take a look at that. We look at our numbers and go from there.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so I think Diana answered, but those numbers, as I just mentioned, they change all the time. We'll take a look at those. Want to make sure I'm answering all the questions. The only, I guess, 2 people that are a little different in the review process for the new council members are the town manager and the town attorney. They are reviewed annually at the end of the year. They are reviewed by you all and their direct reports and who am I missing? Oh, department managers. So we get all the input from folks that they work with, and those 2 positions, at least, I review those results with you all in a executive session, and then we give a review after that. Okay. All right. So we are, where am I? The step pay plan employees. So these are the employees. Let me go back here for a second. The employees that are the full-time employees that are non-police officers, we are recommending that they get, we recommend that we get them up to the middle range if we can by September the 1st or September-ish 2022. And then next year, we're proposing a 2% market adjustment to all positions, non-police officer positions, and then a 4% possible merit increase based on their review. And those on the step plan, as you can see, 2% as of January 1st, 2023. And then on their anniversary date, if they're eligible to be bumped up to that next step, that is when they would get their merit increase. So we gave some examples. I'm sure you guys have read through them. I don't know if you want me to go through them, if you have any questions, but we do have some employees in each of these situations. That's why we brought them up. So you've got regular full-time employee that is below the midpoint. They're doing awesome in their job. We are suggesting that on September 1st of this year, we bring them up to the midpoint. We are also suggesting at January 1, 2023, we give them a 2%, bring the whole range up 2%. And then if they have a great review and everything is awesome and glowing, then they get a 4% merit increase on top of that. So you can see what that looks like. For the employee that is a full-time employee, non-police officer, that is above the maximum range, we're kind of going to cap them out a bit, as you can see here. So no adjustment at all this year. Next year, we'll get them up. I think it's like 1.45, and that just gets them to that maximum point. And they will be capped out with no merit increase at that time for that employee particularly. Then the non-step employee that is above midpoint but below max, we're going to keep them where they are until the end of the year. We'll do a 2% increase after the first, and then provided they have a great, awesome review, 4% merit increase as well. Okay. The last 2 scenarios are for police officers. So your police officer that is at the top step, which is step 6, they'll get a 2% market range on January 1st. And then no increase on their anniversary date because they've kind of maxed out in the steps. Scenario 5 is a police officer that is in those first 5 steps of the step plan. They'll get a 2% market change on January 1st. And then they will be eligible, if they are eligible, meet all the criteria of the steps, then they'll be eligible to jump to the next step on their anniversary date. So as you saw, the budgetary impacts, I know that's what you guys are really worried about. We are suggesting that we get everyone up to that middle point of the range. And to do that by September 1st, that'll be about $24,000. 2023, that 114,000, that includes the 2% and provided everyone's awesome 4% merit increase. And that is for our regular full-time employees. The
I
next
think I'm
one.
going to correct you, Jen. You said 2% if everyone's awesome.
Oh, yeah,
Everyone
sorry.
gets 2%.
Yeah, 2%
but
market.
4% is
4%
the awesome.
is, yeah, the merit. And 63,000 will be for those police officers in the step plan, and that would be with the 2% market increase after the first of the year. So we have 10 positions, I think, for next year. We are putting together job descriptions for those positions now, and we'll be giving those to Employers Council so they can give us ranges that we can hire within for the next year. So we can,
10 new positions?
not all new.
Pardon?
They're not.
Not all new.
So how many are new and how many are?
I think maybe 5 and 5. I'm not sure.
Okay.
We're still finalizing, but we'll go over that at the budget work session.
Okay, I would just,
Our plan is to keep people within the range, and hopefully we can do that with the new hires, provided we keep with the same process.
you done?
Does anyone have any questions?
Good. Okay, so first off, yeah, questions? And wait, let me make a comment just before you go. So the purpose of this is to get a feel of how the council, if they agree with the plan and any feedback that they have for you. Is that correct? Is that what we're doing? Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
So my question is, out of those employees who are below that midpoint, how long have they been there? And basically the reasoning for moving them up to midpoint. If somebody started 6 months ago,
Yeah.
I don't particularly feel like they should be moved up to midpoint because I think that sets a precedent for hiring new people or relatively at a higher
Yeah.
percentage.
Right.
So out of those people, like what, and I, without giving away, obviously, information that you can't give away, what are like, what's the scenarios? How long or?
Let's see, I can tell you we have 2 over the max. I know we have 1 employee that has been here many years, and he is way below the midpoint, and that one for sure needs to be moved up.
Do we have any way over the max?
We don't have any way over the max. We have 2 that have, that are a little over the max.
So what do you do then? No raise?
No raise. We're
Okay.
going to cap them out and try to keep them within the range.
So I guess I'm kind of trying to get to why are we automatically moving people up to midpoint is really, I guess, the question. Why? I mean, that's not common for agencies to have everyone at midpoint and above. I've worked for municipal government, county government, state government, and none of them that I know of had all employees at midpoint or above.
You can answer, Aaron.
Well, I think we've tried to look at people individually, so not just their Timnath experience, because we do have folks who come in with experience from outside the organization, and that should count for something. You know, and in a direct response to the Timnath experience, I don't think, I'm trying to remember, and I don't have the list in front of me. I don't think anyone who has been here less than a year falls into that category. We do have 1 person who is a newer hire that Lisa mentioned who is below the minimum. And so they're in that number and we want to get them to the minimum. And when we set the midpoint, you're going to have to remind me how we got to that number.
Yeah, I guess I'm uncomfortable moving everyone automatically up. I know I've had jobs where I've been there 5 years, and if I had just started at the minimum, it takes a long time sometimes to get up to that point. So I'm just a little uncomfortable with a blanket statement of let's just move everybody up to midpoint. partly too, because I'm thinking future, when somebody comes in, are they going to have that same expectation? Like, oh, that person was only here 2 years and then all of a sudden they were at midpoint.
And I'm going to reiterate and I agree with you, Lisa. I mean, somebody that's coming straight out of college and getting here and throwing them up to midpoint, to me, doesn't make any sense at all. Somebody that's been here 2 years and they're 25 and they've been here 2 years, they shouldn't be at midpoint of their profession. And I think you're saying that, and I agree with her. So I'm not agreeing with your plan here.
I will add a little bit of context to that. And I didn't share the salary ranges with you, but because it's a combination plan, like Diana mentioned, what we did was we benchmarked the minimum of the range at 25th percentile of the market, the midpoint at 50th percentile, and then we did a 20% spread on top of that. So what happens is there's a smaller margin between minimum and midpoint. So sometimes it's only like 5 to 10% between the minimum range and the midpoint. We evaluated all of those employees with each of the department directors, and they felt based on the relevant experience, the time that they've been here, with the couple of exceptions, that would be warranted and it would be fair for other employees and bringing other employees in.
Thank you. And I do want to say, like, I very much think we have great employees and I think they should be paid adequately. It's just that whole blanket. And obviously I know you can't go into detail about particular individuals and that kind of thing. So I understand that.
And same thing with me. I think we got great employees, but somebody straight out of college doesn't get what somebody that's worked for 15 years there that got hired and gets thrown in the midpoint. So I don't know, I still understand what you're doing with this midpoint thing. And it seems like somebody that's 1, 2, or 3 years shouldn't be at midpoint. They should be at somewhere between midpoint and minimum. And I think if I got your nod right, you agree with that too. And so does Robert. So I'd like you to maybe rethink that.
Can I ask, maybe this will help too. So when you mentioned that there's a smaller between minimum and midpoint, if adjustments were done annually based on the 2% cost of living and let's say a 3 or 4% raise, what does that typically look like for employees? Like if I started at the minimum, based on that, how soon would I reach midpoint? And then from there, how soon would I max out? Do you kind of have a guesstimate? I know that this would not be confirmed.
I don't off of the top of my head, but just give you some context. Some of those ranges between min and mid is $600 just because of the way the market falls. So in order for us to align with the market, we didn't want to hire anyone below that 25th percentile. We thought that was an adequate minimum point. And then we set the midpoint just based on that 50th percentile. And then what we did from there was just that 20% from mid to max to give that employee some growth opportunities. And because we don't have a lot of varying positions, we don't have a level 1, a level 2, a level 3, that way that they have growth within their current role.
So Lisa, I still am having a tough time. If somebody just comes in, they're straight out of school and they're going to get what somebody's been here for 8 years because they're going to be in the midpoint, that doesn't make sense to me.
No, and keep in mind too, like the cost of living, once we go 2%, we're moving the whole range up 2%. So the range will move every year. So it will be hard to catch up. You can catch up. Obviously, we've got employees that have been here a long time that are in the higher end, closer to that max. But yeah, we were trying to make this we've looked at every employee. We've looked at how long they've been here. We've looked at how they performed. We've made some decisions internally, just the 3 of us, to try to figure out a way to make this as easy as possible for everyone and as good as possible for the employee experience. So that's what we were trying to do.
And if I could jump in for just a second. So I think one important context to this that piggybacks off of Lisa's comment, for some of these, the min and the mid is so close. So when you hear 14 employees are getting this adjustment, the budget impact is $24,000. 2 employees, and I don't know this number to the dollar, but they're going to be about 90% of that. And these are 2 long-term employees who are profoundly behind the mark and need to be moved forward. So these adjustments to midpoint for the average employee are going to be $1,000 or less dollars. We're not talking about a huge delta, except for the exception of 2 employees who are very long-term employees.
And I'm just, and I know Lisa's going to say the same thing. I'm totally for someone that has lagged behind just because we haven't gotten them, cost of market and appropriate merit raises and stuff like that. I don't think that's what she and I are saying. I think what we're saying is that somebody that's coming in that's new, that doesn't have the skill. Let's say that we have somebody that come into planning and you're going to tell me that midpoint for what's his name, Matt, and for Matt, and midpoint for a person with 1 year worth of experience should be the same. That doesn't seem right. So what am I missing? There's a piece of here that doesn't make sense.
Well, and I think for me, it's hard without seeing those ranges
Yes.
for us to be able to say, yes, I think we
Yes.
should do this without seeing that. You mentioned the $600 or, as an example. I have a hard time picturing it without seeing those job titles and what those ranges are. I don't know if we publish our salaries or we required when I worked for the county, they had to not only publish job titles and they had to publish every single employee's salary without names, just with job titles.
We don't have to publish them, but if an open records request comes in, they are produced. So it's not a big secret.
Okay, because it would be helpful for me, I think, just to see job titles and what that range would be helpful for me to wrap my brain around it.
I'm going to make a suggestion here. I'm going to look at everybody here. I think we agree with the 2023 statements and stuff that are here and what the percentages are. I think what I'm seeing you nod, so there's at least 4 of us that don't have a tough time understanding this midpoint adjustment. So here's my suggestion. Could you, taking Lisa's thought of there's only 24, give us the 24, show us what the minimum, midpoint, and max is and what they're making and how long they've worked, not just here, but in municipal government or whatever, so that we can get a feel of what you're talking about. Because I've given salary raises for 40 years and I'm not tracking. So if I'm not tracking, I think a lot of people wouldn't track.
Yes, and I think the min max is a little confusing because on a scale of 1 to 10, you guys all think mid is 5, but in our range, it's not always 5. It's really
So
never 5.
that's what I think we need to
And
understand.
that's confusing. And also understand that mid is 50% of what the market is
For
hiring at that position.
Yeah. So see, yeah, I
50%.
totally understand that.
So
But-
if we are hiring, and I can't use an engineer, that's not a great example, but if we're hiring an administrative assistant and the 50% mid-range is $50,000, and I can't even give examples.
And
of
it's
what the other
somebody that
numbers are.
just started and got out of school and all of her peers are making 30. I don't understand why we would bounce her up to 50 or him.
just to give you context, because Mark, I come from the same background you do in terms of salaries and all.
Right.
But the context that I want to talk about from Public Works without giving you any names or anything is that first of all, in the Public Works component and in other components of the town, not everybody has, in fact, none in the Public Works side have degrees. And so this is as much a ability to scale the market so that we are being fair to our employees in terms of what another community would pay them for the same thing. Okay, and so that's really what's going on here, more than what the analogy you were making of somebody just coming out of school, and that just doesn't happen.
Well, let's use yours. So we got a public works person, they just get out of high school, and you're going to put them to midpoint, and you're going to take,
Well, no,
and I'm
hang
going
on.
to use Cody,
No,
for example, and you put him at midpoint. That doesn't seem fair.
Well,
I mean,
those two people are in two different categories, so
Okay.
they wouldn't be in the same thing no matter what.
But let's say someone that's been at that position for 5 years,
Yep.
and this new person comes in, same position, same duty schedule, you're going to put them both at the same median?
No, they won't. Let's just take that for example.
That's what I'm trying to understand. So explain
Just
that.
context. So if we got somebody with little or no experience in, let's say, at the bottom level, first of all, if there's somebody been here 5 years and is still in the bottom level, there's an issue.
So
Okay.
there's a step deal in there where.
There's a competency deal. And so as they get more experience, they're going to get from that 50% area to more like the 75 or 80% before they then jump to the next category where they're now at the 50 or something and then start up
So
that.
explain categories with public works.
I got a maintenance worker 1 and maintenance worker 2.
Okay, and that's all you have?
That's all I got right now.
Two levels?
That's right.
You could be a foreman or a supervisor.
Yeah, foreman,
You can
then you
move
got a
up.
foreman and a supervisor. So we got 4 stages right now.
Okay, and so the foreman, his median is a lot more than the median of a worker 1.
Yes.
Oh, a lot, yes.
Okay, all right, then I'm okay with what you're doing. I
Yes,
understand it now.
it took me a while to get my mind around how well, I've been doing this now for a long time for you. So it's just different than the private sector. It's probably very similar to the county, however, but we are in the same market as Fort Collins, Larimer County, and we are vying for that talent.
Absolutely, and I want you to vie for that talent, but I didn't want what I was hearing is you got a pool of public works workers.
Where the
that
new
are
guy gets
all
paid
getting
just like the old
medians.
guy comes in.
Yeah,
That's not happening.
okay.
Do we have have job titles that are served by multiple employees? That's where I think it falls into play more often. If you have, we're small, so we don't have 5 accountant 1s, or something like that. So is that kind of part of the reason why? Because we don't have 5 people doing the same job with various levels of education or experience or things like that.
Robert, do you want to go?
So do you want to make comment?
I would like to make a comment too, Mark.
Okay, go, Lou.
No, go ahead, Robert. Okay, thank you. So what I kind of was hinting at in my emails is I really don't like scenario 2, where the employees they're above their max. I don't like that scenario because if I'm employee at my max and I'm doing a great job, what's my incentive, right? I don't like that scenario at all. And that's kind of what I was hinting around in these emails is how do we do that? Because in the other part that I'm a little hesitant about is if everybody's getting the same market increase and I'm doing my job the same as everybody else, and then there's higher performers in the organization, I have hesitancy about that. Like I always picture performance as a curve, right? You're going to have people on both sides of that curve, but then you're going to have your people out on the ends. And I just worry about going down this path and always having these people that are either they're at their max because they're a high performer or they've got a lot of experience. So that's my only concern out of this is I would look to say, is there a better way to address our high performers?
Maybe I could jump in just for a second, because this, in a way, it actually dovetails, I think, Lisa, to your concern. And so the ranges are set up with more ability to grow past midpoint. So that's why when we talk about a scale of 1 to 10, midpoint doesn't actually represent 5. We tried to give more leeway for people to grow because not all positions are. So the public works is a good example that those folks have a career path, but not all of our positions have a career path. We don't necessarily have every job title that now has a job title that with a 2 or a senior after it. And so what we've tried to do is give a range that gives more runway for folks. What we're also trying to do is balance not leaving people behind so that they're looking other places, but also not getting us so far ahead that we find our wages as high or maybe even higher than Fort Collins or any of the other bigger communities. So it's a balancing act, and we're trying to make a range that is competitive and appropriate, I'll say generous, but not overly so. And then to the other specific point of giving a merit of 4%, what I'm understanding you saying, correct me if I'm wrong here, is you'd almost prefer to see the evaluation to drill down and say 4% for somebody who's doing well, but the next best person might get 5 or 3 for somebody who's a little behind somebody else. We actually had a lot of discussion about this. I've worked in organizations that do it both ways. We settled on 4% for those who, the recommendation of the 4%, because we have a concern of your low performer might drag down your range and make that job title, especially when you only have one person potentially being in that job title. So if they're sandbagging, then they will not keep pace with other communities. And we worry that that low performing person may not be with the community long term. And so that's the concern. I know there's pros and cons both ways.
I will also add, there's something we could do, and we've talked about this too, and there are very few that are in that scenario that you don't like, and I get it, and I don't like it either. But there are ways to handle it. We can give a one-time bonus check for somebody that's awesome that we want to recognize, not increase their salary, not increase them in the range, but just give them a, X amount percent of a check as a bonus versus doing it in the
I think from my perspective, I'd want to empower the managers, right? And looking at some of this, it doesn't seem, if everybody's just blanket, that you're empowering those managers to set up those ways. Because if you say, yep, everybody's getting 4%, what triggers and what pull do you have as a manager? So, but I overall support it. I just would like to see those high performers have the opportunity as well.
Yeah, I want us to be competitive with our neighboring municipalities. And so I do want to see, when you look at the broad perspective, that we on average pay more than those around us. I think that's important. I think it's important to identify those folks that are significantly below midpoint, who have been with us for a long time or who have significant experience. I absolutely agree that that needs to be taken care of. But I don't think that we need to get everyone to midpoint. I think some people should be below, some people should be above. If we're going to hire everyone at midpoint, then midpoint should be our base, right? I think that we should be transparent and truthful in our ranges, and the ranges that we advertise should reflect what we actually pay. Other council members may not like me suggesting this, but I'm a little uncomfortable with the 2% cost of living. I know that may be what everyone else is doing, but when we look at inflation, the price of groceries, the price of gas, the ability of folks to qualify for mortgages, I don't know that the 2% is fair. And at least I personally would be open to going above that, whether it's 2.5 or 3%. But I think that that is something that we could do to show that Timnath is the place to come work, because everyone else is only giving you 2. But this year we looked at the reality of the world and did 2.5 or 3%. So that's my perspective.
Don't everyone speak up at once.
I'm actually okay with going a little higher on cost of living as well, even if we bring down the merit a little bit. And Luke, I actually brought the same thing up to Aaron about a blanket increase. No offense to that employee, imaginary employee that may be underperforming, but like, I don't think they deserve as much as somebody else, regardless of whether they bring our range down. It's more than just our range, and people should fall on all levels of that range. So I also brought that up as far as like whether you cap it as managers can, department heads can give up to 5% to employees, or they're given a lump sum based on that 4%, but they can kind of distribute it how they want to distribute it. And then, yeah, that cost of living, I've worked, I worked 7 years for the county. There were some years that we got 0. And I think in our future, there will probably be years that we give 0. But if we have that to give, I also think 4% for merit is higher than what a lot of places give. So if that were brought down a little bit, and then the cost of living, that way that cost of living takes into account all the employees, whether they're performing well or not. So that's that way to keep that range or whatever. But I agree, not every employee works the same. And if they're a crummy employee and they say, well, I'm going to get a raise anyway, what's the motivation for them to do better? As far as maxing out, there's a lot of government entities that max out, and it stinks. I had an employee that I supervised who was maxed out, and anytime we did the annual evaluation, it was a bummer to say, great job. I can't give you anything for it, but great job. So I would love for you guys to look at some of those alternatives in the rare cases that happens.
Do you guys have any comments? What do you think about the 2.5 that Robert and Lisa are suggesting?
I'm fine with that.
Pardon?
I'm fine with 2.5.
I agree.
I agree. Okay. Is there anything else you want to talk to Jen?
So I think we need a little clarification. So 2.5, and then still 4% merit. We had a lot of discussion about this. So I don't know that we're dead set on everybody getting 4%. We can look at.
No, I think what our advice is, we did this last year, 2 years ago, where we said, here's the pool, if you use 4% as our total revenue, some might get 6, some might get 2. I like that method. I think we all like that method.
And then the last one is a little more thorny, but folks who are behind midpoint.
I think we're okay now that we understand it. Right, Lisa? Or I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I'm still a little hesitant without seeing the numbers, I guess, but I'm not opposed.
My understanding is you're trying to pay market rates for employees that we want to retain.
Yes.
Is essentially what you're doing. You're not looking to just blanket everybody gets you get a check, you get a check. It's just, you guys are being discretionary about it.
Would you
It's my understanding.
spreadsheet?
That's the
We could
intent.
have like
Okay.
a 15-minute session.
I mean, I'm not going to oppose it. I just think, that hiring range, there's a lot of people under the midpoint in the market. That's why it's considered a midpoint. But I'm not opposed to it.
All right. Did you get answered?
I think so.
Okay. All right. Are you okay, Lisa? Jen? Okay. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aaron, I need to talk to you, and hey, Matt, could you
The audience cannot hear you.
This is Chris Alberico, and I live at 4014 Kern Street. And the question I have is that as the Parkway is developed, I hope this is a question I can ask.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as the Parkway is developed, I'm wondering if the town will help with either fencing or vegetation with the Timnath Parkway noise reduction as it pertains to the existing Old Town properties.
Do you want to answer that, Don?
I'll try. Excuse me. There is a design for the Parkway, obviously, and we have landscaping that is going to be committed to on that the area between the Parkway and the town property. Your property goes all the way to the Parkway, and there isn't any additional landscaping planned right now for any noise or anything else, but we can surely look at that and and talk to you about it.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Thanks, Chris. Is there any other general comments?
Sandy?
It's okay. We
Okay,
it's good.
That's it for now.
okay. Consent agenda. Any comments on that? Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passes unanimously. Reports. Any council person have a report? I do. I got two. One is we did our final movie night, and it was well received. And as always, Callie did a great job. And I think everybody sort of enjoyed it and went along. So that's our third one there. And I think they all came off pretty good. Second is I've got a thought, see what you guys think, is, we've received some comments and feedback on people regarding Old Town. And I'd like to set up a committee, much like we have Prost, much like we have Finance. I don't know exactly what it'd look like and what the composition would be or something like that. What I'd like to do is send it to the staff and say, take a look, give us some governance rules, give us some ideas, and then we can talk about it. And then if we decide to do it, then select some committee members and stuff to be on it. Are you okay with examining whether that makes sense and stuff? Okay, so Aaron, if you could sort of take a look. Why don't we shoot for 4 weeks from now? Because that way we get past the budget and that kind of thing.
Yep, we'll have it on an agenda for next month. Yep.
Great. Finance report. Lisa, anything new? Where are you? You're hiding behind a hat. Engineering report. Don, it's probably time we heard from you. So would you give us sort of the high points of what's going on?
Okay, I'll do that. I'll do it short. And if you want any more further diving, I can do that. So I'll start with the Parkway and give you kind of a sense of where we are. It's finally been, the design's been approved. We're in full discussions with the contractor, and we're looking at the scheduling of this. I won't go into a lot of details, but I got to give you a little to give you context. There's a design for the Parkway, which the town is responsible for paying the phase 1 of that, as you know, I'm sure. Also associated with the Parkway is a 24-inch water line that has to be built prior to that going on. That is the developer's responsibility. And so there is a lot of coordination between the developer's activities out there in their development activity, this 24-inch water line, and a culvert crossing that is a part of the design that we have to do. So the scheduling, all those things is being taken care of right now. The railroad crossing, which is a thorn that we all have to deal with. We are dealing with CDOT and the public and the PUC relative to the Main Street crossing. PUC has suggested heavily to the railroad that they want the Main Street crossing to be improved the same time the crossing associated with the Parkway is approved. CDOT is funding the Main Street, a significant portion of the Main Street crossing. So we're in discussions with both CDOT and the PUC and the railroad to link all these things together. The Main Street crossing was supposed to be built this year. I doubt if it's going to happen. However, it is helping us to move the Main Street cross or the Parkway crossing along so that both of those we feel will get done at the same time, but probably early next year. So if you were out there, you'll see grading on the Parkway north and south of the railroad crossing that's been done. And so there are activities going forward that is, associated with the Parkway, but the total contract hasn't been engaged yet, but we expect to have that in a position to bring forward to you. I'm going to say within the next 2 to 3 months. That's the status of that one.
So I've got two things. One, has the railroad approved us crossing?
No.
Okay, so that could still be a year, 2 years, 3 years.
I don't think so. And that's why I brought up the Main Street and the PUC, because they are helping us prod the railroad, who is the culprit in this process, because the Main Street crossing has been approved. The funding of it from CDOT has been approved. And so we still need the railroad's part of that, which PUC is pushing them, and we're going to get it. We're in conversation about that. So I think that is imminent, but they want both things to happen at the same time.
Okay.
That's why I think we've got a better shot at making this happen early next year.
The second thing is, why are we paying for the Parkway as opposed to landings?
Because that was the subdivision improvements agreement where they're rebating us on a per, well, no, they will pay for the second half of it. We're paying for the first half because basically it's the relocation of County Road 5. Okay, so they're going to pay for their half of it, but second, we're paying for the first half first.
So define half.
Half.
Exactly half the dollar amount or half the side,
We're paying for the first 2 lanes. They're paying for the last
Okay.
2 lanes.
Okay.
Yeah, and a true up at the end, as Brian just said.
Okay. All right. Other things?
Okay, Walmart. We have been in discussion with yet another Walmart representative, but this is actually gaining some traction. Had a meeting earlier this week and last week on the striping, and they thought the striping was done. Their local contractor, who we don't know who it is, told them it was done. It's not done. They now have figured that out. We've been in discussion with their engineer in Arkansas. I think we resolved everything with that. They said they have now scheduled it. We don't know what that schedule is, but we expect it to happen by mid-September so that all the striping will be done the way we've suggested over a year ago and hasn't happened yet.
So the last time I saw a diagram of the entryway into Walmart, it was going to take the traffic up to the middle of their parking lot, across and down. Is that still the plan or not?
No.
Okay.
That is the plan we have suggested. That's not a plan that's been approved by Walmart. Right now, the plan that has been approved by Walmart and will get is the striping and the signage associated with the gas station that we believe is the culprit. Okay, is part of the culprit. That particular intersection has operated much better in the last 6 to 12 to 18 months. And we believe also when the roundabout and the continuation of Weitzel is opened, which should happen in the next 3 to 4 weeks, we think it'll have a significant impact on that intersection also and help it.
Anybody else?
Okay, the last one was the Old Town Fire Station, which is, this won't mean anything to you, but this is turned into my trenching ordinance, which is something that we laugh about internally. That was something that drug on about 3 or 4 years. This isn't going to take that long. I've been told I'm going to get the draft report September 9th. And then it'll be, I can talk to you the next council meeting.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Community development report, anything new? Police staff report, anything new, chief? Okay. All right, ordinance number 12, series 2022, an ordinance referring ballot questions to the electors regarding amendments to the town charter. Carolyn, have you caught your breath?
Yes.
So Carolyn, here's how I'd like to do this. Let's talk about the moving the voting date to November 1st, and then we'll talk about the charter amendment for moving the redistricting plan to 15,000 people.
That sounds like a plan.
Okay.
Okay. My name is Carolyn Steffel. I'm from the law firm Dietza and Davis, and I'm special counsel to the town. And I have been representing the town in connection with this ordinance. So I have wanted to talk you through briefly what this ordinance does. And as the mayor suggested, I can talk about the two components of this. And this is also going to be a legislative public hearing. So we'll also be opening up the floor to public comments on this ordinance, which is on the agenda for second reading. The ordinance would refer 2 ballot questions to the voters for the November 8th, 2022 election. This is a general election, so it's also going to be a statewide election. Therefore, it's coordinated with the county clerk and recorder, and it would be conducted by the county clerk and recorder pursuant to an IGA. That involves some cost savings because the costs of the election would be split with other jurisdictions that have ballot questions on the election. And the town has already approved the IGA with the counties, with the 2 counties to conduct that election. And so what it would do then with this ordinance would refer 2 ballot questions to the election, to the electors. The first ballot question would change.
So let's just talk about the calendar change first and stay focused on it.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about the charter amendment on the districting.
No problem.
Okay.
So the first one changes the date of the town's regular elections from April to November. And so again, this would involve a charter amendment. Therefore, it needs to be referred to the voters, and the majority of the voters need to approve this change. There's also a state statute that specifically authorizes cities and towns to change from April to November elections with that vote. The first November, it's keeping even years, and the first November election would take place in 2028. So we would still have an April election in 2024, and then the council members that are elected in 2024 would actually serve 4 years and 7 months to get us to a November schedule. Then there would be a second election in 2026 that we have the same thing to convert to a November election. And then starting in that date at 2028, we would have November elections. This serves a few purposes. First, I talked a little bit about the coordinated election. This would allow the town's regular elections for council members to also be coordinated elections. Therefore, the county clerks would serve as the coordinated election officials. They would print the ballots, they would mail the ballots, they would hire the election judges and oversee the counting of those ballots. That results in some economic efficiencies. We expect, especially as the town continues to grow, that it will be more cost effective to be on the ballot with other jurisdictions because those costs would be split amongst the participating jurisdictions. There's also some efficiency in terms of expected that the ballots would be counted more quickly because the county has more election judges. They also have electronic machines for opening the envelopes, and they just have more resources than the town has. So this does require a vote of the people, and those are the reasons why staff is recommending a referral of a ballot question that would change from an April to a November election.
Okay. So if we can do this, I'd like to have the public comment for that, this charter amendment now, and then we'll talk about the redistricting and public comment for that.
Okay. My sign-in sheet is not split up like that.
They are both together. So actually, why don't people just raise their hand? Who would like to have a public comment on the moving the voting date to November? Okay, so I'm going to make sure. So there's no public comment on moving the voting date to November. Do I do a vote for or wait till they're both together? It's one. Yeah. Okay.
Right. So it would be one motion eventually to approve the ordinance. And should town council want to just go forward with one, then it'd be a motion to approve the ordinance with an amendment to go forward with only one.
Okay. So now I'm going to let you go with the redistricting.
Absolutely. So the second piece would refer a second ballot question to the voters. So they would be voting on both individually. That would also be a charter amendment, which is also the reason why it's being referred to the voters. And that would change the threshold number of voters to get to trigger two events. One, an increase in the size of the town council, and two, changing to redistricting. So right now, the town has one district, so all of the council members are elected at large. And then under the current town charter, when the population of eligible voters gets to 8,000 in any election, that triggers the beginning of redistricting. And then the town starts a process where they would redistrict before you get to the next regular election. They appoint a redistricting committee that studies and comes forward with a proposal to the town council, which can then accept or reject it. If that proposal is rejected, then they go back to the drawing board, put together a new redistricting and bring it to you. At that trigger point, the town will change from one district where everyone is elected at large to 3 districts. 3 of the council members will then be elected by district. And there's some criteria that need to be considered. The district should be approximately equal in population. They should represent like-minded and not like-minded, but similar communities to the extent possible. Non-discriminatory. And so those are factors that are going to be considered. Right now, there's the mayor and 4 council members. When we get to this threshold, we change from 4 council members to 6 council members. At that point, 3 will be elected by district. So basically you'll divide the town into thirds, and each of the third gets to appoint their own or to elect their own council member. Then the additional 3 would be elected at large. At that point, you're going to go forward every other year. So 1 year, you'll elect the 3 that are by district. 2 years later, the 3 that are at large will be elected by votes of everyone in the town. So what the proposal would do for the charter amendment would change the threshold from the current threshold of 8,000 voters to 15,000 voters. And this serves a couple of purposes. First, there was a concern that at 8,000, some of the districts might have trouble finding enough candidates to run because you're dividing the town into 3 portions and each one of them needs to come up with their own candidates. So the thought was if you increase that threshold, it will allow more candidates to run, maybe more competition. Another thing it would do would have administrative savings because the redistricting would be proposed a little bit and it would continue to have all of the council members elected at large until the population got larger. So those are kind of the reasons behind some of the proposals. And that's what this ballot question would do. It does not make the decision that you change to 15,000. It puts it to the voters to make the decision whether the threshold would be changed to when there's 15,000 voters at an election that triggers the redistricting and the new 2 council members that would occur at the next election after you hit that 15,000.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Public, will you open the public comment, Melissa?
Okay, I will open up the public hearing for Ordinance 12. It's 6:21. First up, I don't want to butcher your name, so Reverend Jonathan.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of Town Council. Thank you for your time. My name is Jonathan Nitterat. I'm a resident in the Timnath Ranch neighborhood, 5272 Cloud Dance, and I'm pastor of Timnath Presbyterian Church in Old Town, Timnath. I stand with you to speak against the proposal in Ordinance 12, which would propose to voters increasing the threshold for creating electoral districts from 8,000 to 15,000. In Jeremiah 29:7, the Lord says to the exiles in Babylon, "Seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare." In other words, God says to his people, seek the good of the city, its shalom, its peace, its flourishing, work and pray for it. And so as a pastor and a Christian in this town, I'm to seek the good of the town in which I live, to work and pray for its flourishing. And therefore, I can't help but say it's not seeking the good of Timnath when the interests of my neighbors and neighborhoods other than my own, Trailside, Timnath Lakes, Wild Wing, Old Town, are overlooked or dismissed. It's not seeking the good of Timnath when it is assumed and even stated that residents in those neighborhoods are not interested in offering their voices, time, and leadership to the future of the town. And so it's not seeking the good of Timnath to increase the threshold for creating electoral districts, pushing this down the road another 10 to 15 years. In the past, I haven't been here, but in the past, it's my understanding that changes to the town charter like this have been slower. They've been citizen-led and more transparent. And I wonder why not so much now. If indeed you've been elected to represent and work for all of Timnath, I ask you to live into that calling and to listen to the concerns of your residents and your neighbors, some others of whom you will hear tonight. It's interesting to hear about a committee that might be put together for Old Town. Wasn't sure what the focus of that committee would be, but maybe that's a step in the right direction to listening to other voices that we have in our town. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Reverend. Okay, we expect everybody to be respectful. So no more clapping or outbursts after anybody talks. Thank you. Melissa?
Timothy McDonald.
Absolutely.
It is.
Okay, hello. So my name is Timothy McDonald. I'm a new resident here at Timnath. My wife and my family just moved here in early July. And my story's not very unique. It's a lot of people here, my neighbors, your neighbors are new to Timnath. Timnath is a very growing community. And something that links all of us new folks together is that the cost of moving is very, very expensive. And so whether it be the cost of a new house, interest rates rising, or just the Herculean effort of moving all of your things from one house to another, as we've arrived here, the reality is we're going to be here for a bit, you know. And so what I get the sense of a lot of people that I talk to in my neighborhood is a sense that we want to put down roots here, and we want to grow with this community. And we want to engage in the community, both inside and outside the town government apparatus, not just to live here, but to help shape the town into a place we can all collectively fondly call home. Voting districts are an excellent tool to do that. I understand this is not a vote on whether or not to have districts. I understand this is not a vote on whether or not to approve the threshold. But let me entertain me for a second. Just 3 points on why voting districts are so good, just to remind everyone. Voting districts really encourage engagement as people can focus their limited energy and attention into organizing around their immediate vicinities or common interests. We're all strapped for time. You know, I'm a father of 2. My neighbors on either side of me, Taylor, he's got a daughter and another one on the way. Frank, he's got 2 daughters around the same age as my daughters. You know, we're all so strapped on time, and voter districts will really help us to best utilize our time. Another point, local problems are best sourced to local solutions. Districts really lend themselves to this. Now, obviously, not all solutions need to be elevated to town government, but some definitely will need to be. And we can have both software organizing within the community and representation that comes along with districting. Also, symbolically, it concretely gives people something they can tangibly say that, yes, me and my neighbors have a voice. We have a representative for our district. And that's important. And then the final thing I'll say about the benefits of districting is the United States has really nice government apparatuses that are anti-majoritarian. Districting is a bit of a way to give a little more voting weight behind groups of people that might not be able to raise the attention otherwise. So why am I telling this? You already know the benefits. The question is not if, but really when. And what I'm saying is I'm making the case. I would really ask you guys, let's not tread these waters. Let's not put this on the ballot. We already had this $8,000 threshold. There's no need to kick this down the road. The time is now. All of us new folks are here now, ready to engage. And voter districts will really help us to do that. And if we try to kick this down the road, it's really going to take the wind out of our sails for people like me and my neighbors and your neighbors. So last thing I'll say is if there's a worry that there aren't enough people to run in districts, I submit that this might be a bit of a chasing our tails a bit. I am making the case that districts will actually encourage participation rather than needing participation to first happen and numbers to come up for us to introduce districts. I know as myself personally, without districts, I'm going to feel a little more detached and a little more like I won't be able to, this is just another town. There's decisions that are made and I will have a little more separation from that. So thank you very much for your time.
Yep, thank you. Melissa.
Okay, next I have Charlie Schneider, and we need to be respectful of our 3 minutes and time.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you for your time. And commenting on the redistricting subject, I just wanted to comment that I think it seems rushed to modify the town charter and maybe to push the comprehensive plan also at the same time, kind of down the road, and is with a single public hearing just seems too quick. There's obviously a lot of public interest you can see by, you know, the Old Town committees and the people that are here, that we believe that this is a matter that takes more public hearing to consider maybe the pluses and minuses, and you know, put both sides on the table to understand why you want to change our town charter yet again. And I'd just like to see some more public hearing and allow everybody to get a better understanding of what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa?
Okay, let's see, Wade Fickler?
Yes. Good evening, council members. My name is Wade Fickler. I reside at 4029 Kern Street in Old Town, Timnath. I appreciate outside counsel's laying out of the ordinance, and I'm here to say I approve, or I support all of it except for the changing of the threshold for redistricting. And I do appreciate that it is in separate questions. I think that is a very good move on your part. I have a few questions for you. Councilmember Wagner, what election experts did you consult with, or what research did you do when reviewing the pros and cons or considering the pros and cons of delaying establishment of electoral districts?
This isn't really a question and answer time. It's really a public comment time. So please feel free to talk and say what you need to say, but the council isn't going to be deposed right now.
Okay, I did hear Q&A earlier. Are we not taking any questions, council members?
We aren't taking any question, ma'am.
All right. Well, then I guess I'll have to make some assumptions. Council members, nothing is more important than the relationship between citizens and the people they elect to represent them. Any proposal to alter this relationship deserves more than one public hearing and immediate vote. Cutting off this conversation now, which has only just begun, would be an abuse of your power and a violation of the trust constituents have placed in you with their vote. Establishing electoral districts would ensure broader representation of the full community. District elections make running for office simpler and cheaper. A candidate just needs to run in his or her extended neighborhood and doesn't need that much money to run a successful campaign. District elections also make it easier for newcomers and people with fresh perspectives to win elections, especially those from underrepresented areas such as Old Town. In fact, no voting method has been subject to more litigation for its discriminatory impact on local elections than what you're trying to do here tonight. I urge you to maintain current requirements for establishing local electoral districts. And because you refuse to answer my questions, I will assume that you have done little to no research to fully understand the pros and cons of your proposal. Your stated rationale defies logic and runs contrary to the preponderance of credible research. Some of you have stated publicly you have no strong opinion about the outcome of this vote. Then why on earth would you dare to overturn the vote of the people that happened in 2015? I don't see anybody here speaking in favor of this ordinance tonight, but you have a room full of people speaking against it. This is hardly a strong case for moving forward with delaying formation of electoral districts.
Thank you. Melissa?
Oh. Clarify the process. I can clarify the process. So this is a legislative public hearing. So the town is taking public comments at 3 minutes per person to accept public comments. Encourages you not to repeat, but to bring new points to their attention. Then the town board will have the town council will have the ability to deliberate. They will have the ability to speak, and that is the time when they may choose to answer questions or may choose to share their opinions, and they'll be deliberating on the ordinance. So it's a format issue rather than assuming that they're not wanting to answer your questions. The format is, this is the format for accepting public comment right now.
Melissa?
That's all I have signed in right now.
Okay. Does anybody wish to speak?
Did anyone come in late? Oh, I'm sorry. Are you Jennifer? Okay, you didn't choose which item you wanted to talk
Jennifer,
on. So
you're
Jennifer
welcome
Martin.
to come up.
My first
No,
time filling
that's
out that
fine.
form. Thank you, council members, for the opportunity to speak with you as a citizen of Timnath Lakes. My husband and I moved from Fort Collins to Timnath Lakes a little over a year ago, primarily for the neighborhood that we moved into, Timnath Lakes, and its proximity to Old Town, the downtown area, family members, businesses, and the promise from our developer that this was a commitment made in the investment of Old Town as a community in the thriving neighborhood that we were hopeful to be a part of and to join into. Since living there, it's become clear through the actions, comments, that perhaps isn't the case, that the interest in allowing Old Town to prosper is not intentionally a priority of this council. And especially when movements are made to disenfranchise the residents of Old Town, and specifically increasing the limit to 15,000 does exactly that. Specifically, myself, a faculty member at CSU, incredibly involved in faculty council, shared governance on a multi-billion-dollar operation. I was looking forward to the opportunity to finally, as a new homeowner, to invest intentionally in the town that I chose to invest in by building a $500,000 home here, and was discouraged from doing so because the population centers in Harmony Club and Timnath Ranch would mean that I wouldn't make town council. I wouldn't have the support because Old Town wasn't intentionally represented on the council and didn't have the population to garner enough votes to allow me a seat on town council. Redistricting to represent Old Town would give newcomers to this town with fresh vision, with ideas, and with a commitment financially and in perpetuity to be present here, the opportunity to be heard outside of public comments once a month in a town council meeting. So I strongly encourage this council to consider the office to which you were elected, representing all residents of Timnath, and allow all residents of Timnath to be represented in this forum in intentional ways so that my family feels that we are a part of the community we have invested in a very intentional way. And I impose upon you to think about the impacts of moving in the opposite direction and what will happen to the new young residents of Timnath and the future of this community if this movement is made in a way that encourages them, or discourages them rather, from participating in the legislative process by which we are afforded in the town that we live in. So thank you for the time. And I again encourage you to reconsider the vote today.
Thanks for your comments. Melissa, is that the end of public comment?
That's all I have.
There have also been some written public comments that have submitted that I believe have been distributed to everyone on town council. So I would also submit those to the record of this public hearing, that those written comments have been submitted to the town as well. Thank you.
Okay. No.
Written comments are not read aloud.
Yeah.
But they are
part of the agenda and they are part of the public record. But if you just took we go against the format of what we're required to do, so no, we can't. Lisa.
First, I have a question. If we were to delay voting on or delay approving this to be put on the ballot, do we have an estimated time frame for when we would potentially hit that 8,000 voter? Do we have like an estimated?
I'm going to refer that to your town clerk.
It's estimated that at 2024, we would probably hit the 8,000 registered voters. And then at that time, we would need the
Are you certain of that,
committee.
Melissa? I thought your work session packet's at 2026. Are you certain that 2024?
I guess my question is, we would potentially have time to implement a committee if we wanted to look at this, because we could then put it on that next ballot, even if that's the first election that we have 8,000, because we don't know the 8,000 until we actually have it, right?
Correct.
Okay, so that was my one question. And then a couple of comments. First one is thank you to all of you for coming out today. It's always great when we have community input. And even though we're not able to read all the comments that we got, you can see how long some of them are, but I do want to let you know that all the ones that I have read stated very similar opinions to those of you who are in the crowd tonight. So if that's kind of what you were looking to see, kind of what we had gotten. I was one of those council members at the last meeting who very openly said I did not have a strong feeling one way or the other. Many of our comments that we received talk about which I just thought this was interesting, so I'm going to point it out. It talks about how us moving forward doing this is undemocratic, which is interesting to me because the way that we are the most democratic is by putting things to voters. But I can say that my own opinion right now, after hearing everyone and knowing that we have some time, I personally would feel comfortable putting a hold on that one piece and moving forward with the date change and things like that, because I do feel like we don't need to rush into this. And I know some of you speak of us not representing Old Town. I don't know that I have ever said or given any indication that I don't support Old Town or what's going on in that. And so the way I always look at things is that if I'm neutral on a matter and there's not maybe strong data either way, then I typically, or I don't feel that it has a negative impact, those are the things I look at. Then at that point, I also do take into account what we are hearing. And by not hearing from people in some of the other communities leads me to think that they don't have a strong opinion either way anyway. I've run for town council for 2 different elections. So I do know what it's like having kids, having a job, and having to go out there and campaign for an election. And so I don't know what any of the other council members feel, but I personally am okay putting a hold on that based on the feedback that I've gotten.
Brett?
First off, many of the arguments about favors of districts, I actually am sympathetic and agree with many of them. It's not a question of do we district and is it a good thing? It's just a question of is it the right time? For me, the rationale for simply asking the question was, last election we had 1,500 voters. Is that the right number to divide into groups of 3? And I don't know what the answer is on that. I'm not presuming to tell the community what the answer is on that. I thought it was worth asking the question. And in numerous elections, yeah, we haven't had a lot of people run. That's the historical fact that we've seen. And that's where I base my rationale for wanting to ask the question, and not so much on future speculation of people might run, people might not, 6 years, 8 years down the road. We are still a small town. You can drive across it in 10 minutes. I think the majority of the council members up here spend about $500 on their campaigns. I know because I've looked at everybody's. It's not a huge financial burden where you need all kinds of backing to get on this council. And I'm not sure I agree with the assessment that we're so siloed that we vote as a block of a neighborhood. Personally, if I lived in one of the other neighborhoods in Timnath, I would lean into that if I was running for office, that I am bringing some diversity. I think that would be a strength. And I see that as someone that if I decide to run next time, I might be running against somebody. I think that would be a good thing to lean into and not consider that a weakness. As for why we're looking to just go straight to the voters on this, there's been some arguments proposed about looking at the 2015 precedent. That was an election that had 427 people vote in favor of that charter amendment. Now we're a town of over 6,000 voters. We're not the same community that we were when 2015 was voted on. And from the charter, we read about what those amendments were. In 2015, I'm reading from the charter now, the Timnath Town Council appointed a charter amendment committee to gauge public support and seek public input for proposed amendments. The 2015 amendments include 1, increase the elector threshold at which the town council membership will be increased from 1,200 electors to 8,000 electors. 2, reduce limitations on the town's ability to appropriate funds for unanticipated expenditures. 3, extend the deadline for filing of the town's annual audit so it is consistent with state law. 4, remove lax council member meeting attendance requirements and delegate responsibility for setting such requirements to the town council. 5, provide more flexibility to the council in addressing potential future budget shortfalls. 6, remove 1-year waiting period required between the end of a term as a council member and subsequent employment with the town. 7, amend the procedural requirements for council removal of the town manager and town commission members from their positions. And 8, incorporate various administrative and grammatical recommendations made by town staff and consultants. It's a very lengthy list. There's a lot of complicated issues there. The Charter Amendment Committee was put together to even flesh out the ideas that could even be proposed to the community. So they were ready to put on a ballot. For me, I think asking to move the elections from April to November doesn't require 5-6 public hearings for people to make up their mind on that. It's a very straightforward question. Moving from 8,000 to 15,000 electors, I feel the same way. It's a very straightforward question. There's not a lot to unpack there. Certainly, if you're opposed to us putting this on the ballot, I would suggest that you didn't need 6 hearings to make up your mind. You know already how you're going to vote on it. And I have enough trust in my community to make a decision that's good for Timnath. Not even everyone here is from Timnath Lakes or Old Town. We have some that are interested in this matter that don't live in those neighborhoods. And what I certainly would hope is that this council is never afraid to ask a question to the community because we're afraid of what the answer might be, or we might not like what the answer might be, or that we're looking to limit the scope of the amount of people that are going to weigh in on an issue. There's no more open way to get people to weigh in on an issue than on the ballot. And so I think it's a very straightforward question. And so I do support moving forward. If the town votes to keep it at 8,000, that's fine with me. We'll move forward with that. And the community that's here now will have decided that there'll be support for that, and not from 400 voters from 7 years ago. So those are my thoughts, and I'd be happy to share any more thoughts about ways that we have tried to support Old Town, but I don't think this is necessarily the proper form to do it, but feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you. First of all, let me just say, I think it's outstanding that we have so many people here today making comment and that we've received so many comments. I hope we can continue to see that level of engagement, because we've all sat here in so many meetings and basically spoken to an empty gallery. So, I think government functions best when there is robust debate and participation. And so, this is really encouraging, and I hope that this is a trend that continues, and that those who have expressed a desire to get involved, continue to get involved. We have a number of town committees and commissions, and it seems like we've struggled to fill spots. I know that we're looking at filling some spots on Planning Commission at this point, and so I truly believe that when this proposal was brought forward, it was in the best interest of how do we as a town best represent and manage our population, and that our experience had been that we're struggling to find people that want to step up and take on this role. I look back at our last election, and it was the prior council. I know Luke Wagner and I weren't on that council, but the prior council put the question to the voters, should we term limit our council members? And the council took the affirmative step to essentially ask the voters, should we limit our power? And the voters overwhelmingly said, yes, we support that. I bring that up because regardless of what the outcome of this is, I think it's unlikely that anyone on this council will be directly impacted by what the result is. If we hit 8,000 in 2026, as was suggested, if we went to districts, it would be 2028, and all of us here will be term limited by then. So for me, the question is what's best for our town, and when it's a close call and it has to do with our bedrock founding documents, I think it does make sense to put that question to the people. If we moved this forward, there is plenty of time between now and the election for robust public debate, and for I hope it's more than 1,500 people that vote in the next election, with it being a coordinated national level election. Maybe we'll get some more participation. But I think that this is an important question about our basic structure of governance. And that is something that it does make sense to have the people make that call. So I'll be supporting moving the proposal forward.
Do you want me to go next or would you? I'll go. The reaction from some of the Old Town people has surprised me. And the reason why is I thought this would be a benefit to Old Town. I might be naive, I might be dumb, but when we were bringing all this up and we were talking, we talked that this would be a benefit for Old Town. So why would it be? Right now, with full allocations, there's 7,000 voters that are sitting there and going on. And there could be 5 Old Town people at this council or 7. I mean, there's no limit to what can happen. Whereas if we do districting, the Old Town will not get 2 of those council positions because they will be divided up into other districts. And so the district that Old Town will fall in will be a district that has the 500 registered voters that Old Town has, plus another 2,000, because we'll be at 7,500, 8,000 voters, registered voters. Divide that by 3 because the charter says that it has to be an equal amount in each district. And so Old Town will be on the shorter end of that district also. There's only 500 that'll be from Old Town. There'll be 2,000 that'll be from the rest of the town. But I share with you, Brett, that I've never seen anybody say, I'm a Harmony or I'm a Saratoga Falls. You know, I went and knocked doors on all people and nobody ever said, when I went around, are you Old Town? Are you Harmony? Or are you Timnath Ranch? Never had that happen. They just don't ask. And I don't think I've never seen a vote, and you can disagree with us, but if you look at all of our past minutes, I've never seen a vote where we played favorites on any neighborhood. It just hasn't happened. And so it's disappointing to me that we have disappointed you guys on our intentions, because our intentions is totally to sit there and be equal and fair. And I'm so fortunate to have 4 other people that are about as fair-minded a people as I've ever been. I've never heard anybody talk about anything discriminatory or counter to the town. All of us are not getting paid a dime for doing this. We're doing it because we love the community, and that means we love all the community. We like Old Town, love going to the Christmas lighting. We love going down and to the Fall Festival. We love going to 4th of July fireworks. We love all those things that Timnath means and goes. And I can tell you, if you'd listen in to our meetings, you would hear almost universally, we talk about Timnath. In fact, I don't think, correct me, any of you, if I'm wrong, I never remember once that we said, well, I want this because I live in Timnath Ranch, or I want this because I'm in Saratoga Falls, or I'm in Harmony. I've never seen that. So I'm surprised that this wasn't accepted as a benefit to Old Town. I really am, and that's sort of what it is. One of the other things is that I want to mention is there was some, the town is dissatisfied with the town council. We did a request, a survey back in mid 2021. And one of the questions we asked is how is the town's communication and outreach to you. And 85% said we are very satisfied or satisfied with the outreach. That tells me that, and the people that took this, they took the survey for us was a third party we had nothing to do with. They did the questions and they came back and said they had never seen such a high degree of satisfaction, resident satisfaction, as they did from that survey. So, you know, I trust the town. I trust the residents here. I trust that they make the right decision, and I trust that they don't make them in a parochial way where my neighborhood's better than somebody else's neighborhood. I just haven't seen it. And so with that, you know, I'm going to vote for this because I think that's the only democratic way to do it. That people should decide our laws and our governances. And I think that to let the people decide. And if the people come back and say, nope, we want 8,000 now, we'll be more than happy to sit there and encourage and develop that and embrace that. And if they come back at 15,000, that's a democratic way to do it. And that's democracy at work. So that's my thoughts. Luke.
So I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I echo Councilman Axmacher in saying that we appreciate it. I did read every single one. I took the time. I appreciate everything that you guys submitted to this committee or our council. I've always considered myself a Timnath resident and not a resident of Timnath Ranch. I just don't consider that. I ran to benefit the entire community. If I thought that I couldn't make a difference in the town beyond just my neighborhood, I wouldn't be up here. I wouldn't want to do this. And so I'm concerned with the fact that Old Town residents feel like the town of Timnath has turned their backs on residents. That's just not okay. And I like the proposal of getting a committee out there. I like getting more input. I want to have more input. It helps me decide. I'm a data-driven guy and I want feedback. So for me, you know, I also echo the idea that to get your voice heard here, there's a lot of committees, there's a lot of commissions, and that's how I started. I started on the finance committee and I learned a lot. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity to participate in this community and make your voice heard. And I just encourage you guys to take what you're feeling today and take those to those committees, take those to those commissions and make it heard, because it is important. It is important to all of us, and what you have to say is important. For me, what I look at in the redistricting is it's not an if, it's when, right? I just see that as, I think Brett mentioned that, and it's not an if, it's a win. And I also echo the idea that that I don't see us pushing anything through if people are voting on it. I want people to vote. I want people to be passionate about their vote, because when I ran, I believe that every vote matters. Every single vote matters, and I still believe that. And so if I'm going to support putting it out to the 15,000, because I want people to vote. I want people to vote in this town. I want there to be passion about it. And without voting, then there's no point. So I think that we just putting out to the town and respecting the town and knowing that our town is educated and will make the right decision, whatever that may be, if it's 15 or 8, it's just a win for me. It's just a win.
I've got one quick question. One of the other things that hasn't been brought up yet on why we identified this as a problem is this last election, of which 2 of our guys here were in. We only had 3 people run. If all 3 of them were from the same district, we would have not had anyone run the second election on the second district. What would have happened then is we would have appointed them, which is a totally undemocratic way to do it. If we would have had 2 and 1, we still would have had one, that one would have walked in as opposed to running an election. And that was the thing that concerned us the most is we want a democratic process that go on, not a council being incestuous and going on, which again, we demonstrated when we put term limits on all of us. Every single one of us is now term limited. None of us will ever see the 8 or 15,000 voter range because we'll be term limited out. We'll be gone. So that hits out. The other thing though, and I want to be clear, and I think everybody, my fellow council members identified that. Thank you for your comments. Almost all of them were very respectful and we understood it. And we heard you. We heard you because what we did, what I'm suggesting is that we do form a committee, that we listen to the comments, that we get people. We hope you apply for the committee when it comes in. I think we'll be doing it. We'll find out in 4 weeks, but I hope people apply, and that'll be a great way to sort of start we're way past starting, but it'll be a good way to listen where maybe some of you feel you're not being heard. Carolyn.
So the next action item after you're done with your discussion is to consider the ordinance. The first ballot question in Exhibit A, what we refer to kind of as ballot question 1, is the one to increase the redistricting threshold from 8,000 to 15,000. The second ballot question is to change the November election. The town packet included town charter excerpts, so you can go in there and see what the proposed specific wording changes were to the town charter. I did notice one typo in the ordinance where a reference to section 4.5.1 of the charter is actually should be changed to 4.5.2. The red line is still correct. The number just fell off. Okay. So if you do approve it, we could just have a straight motion to approve, but correcting that typo to 4.5.2 in Exhibit A. And you could have a motion to approve it with modifications to make any changes you're proposing to the ordinance.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. Do we have any more discussion?
I just want to add one thing.
Yes.
Because you had mentioned about why it got put on there, but I do want to say that at the last time we all met, we did talk about how pros and cons, that this could potentially incentivize people in those districts that right now don't feel like they can run, would incentivize some of them to run. I know we talked about how there, even though no one from Old Town has run since, I think it was like 2014, I think it was, or something, that we did talk about how districting might make it, as you pointed out, where we don't have a candidate from a certain area, but then we also talked about how it might encourage people to run.
So do I have a motion?
All right, Karen, help me out. So I'm moving to approve with a typo correction. Is that?
Yes.
Okay, then I will make a motion to approve an ordinance referring ballot questions to the electors regarding amendments to the town charter with the recommended typo correction.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ordinance number 12, series 2022, an ordinance referring ballot questions to the election regarding amendments to the town charter with amendments or clerical corrections.
We got a vote still.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, sorry.
I wanted to make sure we had it all laid out.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion passes 4-1. Ordinance number 13, series 2022, an ordinance amending Chapter 16, Article 6 of the Timnath Land Use Code. Kevin.
Thank you, Mayor. So I will kind of leave it up to you guys on how you want to go about this. I can just kind of give a brief overview of the sections that we're changing. And if you want to have specific questions on some, we can do that, or I can kind of run through them all. So I'll kind of leave that up to you guys.
would like you to talk about the windmill because
Yep.
we had a couple comments
we can do that.
from that on Wild Wing people. So if you could make some comments on that.
So first, I'll just kind of highlight what these land use code changes are, what we are proposing. So what we are proposing actually because of recently passed House bills would be 2 childcare homes. So we are proposing some eliminating of a number of those within a subdivision criteria because of that House bill. Open space requirements associated with commercial and mixed use zoning districts. Then some certain dimensional standards within the code, land use or landscape buffering requirements, just kind of changing those up, enhancing those, and then adding in some requirements or regulations for wind energy structures. So the reason why we are bringing those forward is we didn't have any of those within the land use code currently. There was a House bill that was passed recently that basically said a metro district or HOA cannot restrict a wind energy device on a property. So since we didn't have any regulations in place for where they could be located, some things like that, that's why we have added in some of those requirements for the land use code as an accessory structure, just because with a metro district or HOA not being allowed to prohibit them, we kind of felt it'd be best to have some type of regulations that they could fall back onto for if and when somebody would want to propose a wind turbine, a residential sized wind turbine. With that one, we did receive some comments, as Mayor, you had mentioned. So the reason why we had the requirements as we did is in that House bill, it talks about that restrictions on a wind turbine can't be so stringent that it reduces the efficiency by more than 10% or increases the cost by more than 10%. So we kind of took that as, staff took that as we need to find some pretty fair regulations for wind turbines, but that also kept in safety aspects to it. So that's why we proposed the regulations that talked about the fall zone, which then kind of sets the height limit. And that all basically depends on the size of your lot. For instance, if you have an acre-sized lot, you could get a residential-sized wind turbine somewhere in the range of 55 to 60 feet. But if you're on a lot that's only 10,000 square feet, you'd be maxed at roughly about 17 feet in height. We kind of did some math on some existing lots out there. So it does vary from that aspect, just because of the size of the lot, and some things like that, along with the lot line setbacks. And as some of the other concerns about birds or other environmental, with these aren't the giant 200-foot size wind turbines, where a lot of these are smaller grade. The wind turbines would be no more than about 10, 12 feet in diameter. Actually, a lot of them that we've seen actually are more a cylindrical tube that's probably no more than about 5 feet in diameter. That kind of captured a little bit differently. So staff didn't have much of a concern with some of those environmental with birds, just because these are on a much smaller scale, that wouldn't necessarily inhibit, any of those birds flying. So I hope that answers some of those questions. Mayor, if you have any others, I can touch on that as well.
This is a question. Can homeowners association, so let's say we pass this land use, can homeowners associations override it and either say no windmills or smaller ones than what the land use code says?
So that's where the House bill specifically states that they cannot prohibit them. So they have to allow them within their district, but they cannot be more strict. And that's where the House bill also states that it can't be, they can't place restrictions on it that would decrease the efficiency by more than 10% or increase the cost by more than 10%.
Thanks.
Another question on that. So do we know if these height guidelines, or whatever we want to call them, would fall into that 10%? Do we know if there are homes on smaller lots where the height would reduce the efficiency?
So that's where the fine line starts to kind of play out. Actually, a lot of municipalities, I think you even saw it in your packet with one of the public comments, a lot of those actually have a 75 or 60 foot height restriction to it. We took the safety aspects from it. The town has a little bit more leniency with the restrictions that we can have in place. So which is why we went with the fall zone to be that more safety standard, because at that point, if we've got something that is 60 feet tall and a 10,000 square foot lot and that thing falls, potentially that's where it becomes a little bit more of a dangerous situation. So that's why we kind of went with that, because it's more falling on the safety aspect and not the efficiency aspect.
Kind of, but people have trees that could do the same thing that a wind turbine could do. I'm just worried about if there's somebody who could come back to us at some point and say, in my yard, I need this size, otherwise the efficiency is reduced. And then what do we do in those situations?
That's one of the things that as far as we know, there's no really cases that have happened, because this is a more recent House bill.
Okay.
And that the vagueness of that 10% was something that concerned us as well, just because, how do you actually determine if you've, decreased it by 10% from that aspect? So that's something that we were concerned about, but since we don't really have anything that we can fall back on, just because this is such a newer thing within the last 2 years, it was kind of hard for us to really determine if, we do need to have a set height or not. We can, as time goes on, if we get more and more of these, we can obviously amend the code to get into more in line with that. But we kind of felt this was a fair playing ground to at least have some initial standards that these can abide by.
Okay, and question 2 is this something that people would need to come to the town for approval for? So at that point, you would know how many there are and things like that.
Correct. Yeah, it would require a building permit as an accessory structure, because there's also electrical to it. So yeah, we would be aware of how many are in town.
Okay, that was my only question on that piece. I don't know if we're going over all the pieces or if we want to just talk about I had a question about the green space.
I've got one more question on windmill.
Yep,
and then
perfect.
Okay, so I know we had one public comment that was really, I thought, real articulate and somebody that was real knowledgeable on wind. Did you talk to them and get their thoughts?
I did. I emailed him and he emailed me back. And he had the same comments that he had before. I believe the majority of his concerns are taken care of here, even though he wanted it more than what we were doing. I explained, how we were doing it.
Okay. He wanted bigger ones? I thought he was wanting smaller ones.
No, he wanted more restrictions.
More restrictions. Okay,
Yes.
Yeah. So he did. He wanted smaller ones. And we
He
can't
wanted
do
none.
that, right?
He wanted
Because of the
none.
bill?
Excuse me?
Do you want to answer that question? Or you got,
No.
maybe I interrupted you.
Yeah, go ahead and
So
ask the
he
question.
wanted smaller ones. Then I followed up and said, we can't do that because the bill precludes us from putting more of a limitation than what the House bill had.
That's correct.
Okay.
And he was trying to have 0.
Okay.
I'll just add a comment that, as I read the House bill, it talked about any aesthetic-based restrictions that put us in this 10% threshold. I did look up a little bit on residential windmills over the weekend, and energy.gov, it recommends the bottom of a turbine be 30 feet above any obstruction within 500 feet. So we're probably already, just based on our safety-based guideline, infringing on that somewhat. And some of the marketing materials or some of these recommended 65 feet. They said if you start dropping to below 50 feet, around 45 feet, you'd see massive drops in efficiency. So kind of restricting ourselves to the safety aspect of this, I think, does put us in safe legal territory.
Then you had another question, Lisa?
I did, but let me find it here in the packet. So I'll be back in a minute.
I'll come back to you if nobody else. Did you have anything?
Well, I just want to say I really did appreciate the public comment on this topic. I know that person is someone who frequently submits comment and is always very well thought out and articulate. You know, I guess my question is, what are other jurisdictions around us doing? You know, I don't see this as something that we necessarily have to adopt right away. I think we could take the time to make sure that we're doing it in a legally defensible way and in a way that makes sense. I'm kind of leaning towards maybe hold off on this, but I'm just curious if we've looked at what other people are doing on that.
Yep. So that was the first place we started. And actually the genesis for this is we actually had a resident that wanted to put one in their yard. And since we didn't have the regulations, that's where we started to dive into it a little bit more. So we couldn't find really much with Fort Collins or with Windsor. They might have had it, defined differently, but we couldn't really find much with them. Larimer County, they had some regulations that actually part of ours were kind of the genesis from. There are some other, communities that were also attached, that you all saw that were kind of either on the western slope or, south of us, in the Netherland or, Grand County, some things like that. Those communities actually had a set height restriction of 60 or 75 feet, not necessarily this fall zone that could kind of give the flexibility to it. So a lot of the other communities actually go a little bit, they have more regulations listed, but they're more technical regulations about the device itself. But when it comes to, setbacks, heights, things like that, they're actually higher than what we would have in our code. So we have looked around. We did kind of take the pros and cons from some, and that's where we kind of came with ours. And with the one that we had, that was being asked of, that's why we were kind of thinking we should have at least something on the books for now, and we can kind of look into this a little bit more if we need to. If we start to get to a point to where we have a lot of these being proposed and we need to relook at some regulations, but we kind of felt we should have at least a bottom line to start with on some of these.
So we did send this back. If you, I know you remember, 2 weeks ago we had this on the agenda and we asked them to take a look at the wind energy part of it and stuff. And I assume that you did. And okay.
So one of the, in section E here, it says, must not emanate noise more than 10 decibels above the ambient noise levels. How would we measure that? Because I guess ambient noise is it at night? I'm concerned about the wording around that.
So in the municipal code, we actually have the noise ordinance that talks about decibel levels through that. So it's basically getting above the noise ordinance for our municipal code. It's trying to have a device that doesn't actually emit more noise than what we allow within our code.
Sorry, can you explain that to me again? I'm not sure I understand.
So in our municipal code, we have our noise ordinance that talks about, decibel levels that are acceptable at certain times of the day, depending on the use. So with this, by adding that 10 decibels above, it's allowing for some flexibility within the allowed noise per the decibels that are within our land use code, but it's to try and keep it within a level to where it's not exceeding and then getting to be too noisy, that it then exceeds those decibel levels that's per our municipal code. But it's some of these, when you get into the high spinning, if there's a pretty big gust of wind, that's going to be a little bit noisier from that standpoint, but it's trying to keep these things pretty quiet.
Thank you. So is it possible, just depending on where you live, that this baseline could be different? Or, like, or is there a set baseline for all of the town? That's,
There's set baselines for the entire town for decibel levels. So it's not depending on the subdivision or the location you're at. It's also measured from the property line. So when we do get noise complaints, things like that, it's measured from the property line, at that point. So you could have a large lot, acre lot that is sitting in the backyard that you wouldn't hear it, when you get to that point, just because it's so far away. But if you're in a smaller lot, you would have to make sure that device actually is, quieter than normal from that standpoint from your neighbors.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
So I just have a question about, so I'm on page 85 in the packet where it talks about the changes to the open space requirement reductions related to shared parking.
Correct.
Can you tell me a little bit more about, or I guess, do you have some examples of what that would be? And I know we've worked recently, Brett, especially you, to try to increase the amount of open space. And so I'm just kind of wanting a little more information on why in my mind, shared parking would take up less space than individuals having parking, which would allow for more open space, I guess. So
yes and no. So the best example that we have is if you take a look at Murphy, Starbucks, Chick-fil-A. So each of those are individually designed. They meet the open space requirements. And if you look between each lot, both lots have landscaping, at the property's edge. If you would take the front of those lots out of the landscaping and put in a shared parking to where you could effectively, park in front of Starbucks and still walk over to Murphy, you would reduce the amount of landscaping that's there, just because you have a little bit more of a larger asphalt area due to the drive aisles and things like that. So the intent with this is if you create a development just like the Neenan project, just to the north of us, to where you have multiple buildings, multiple tenants that share an overall larger parking lot, they would be eligible for that reduction, just because if the lot is in the small enough nature, the drive aisles and additional that's in there would take up what would be landscaping if they were individual lots. So that's the only way that they could qualify for that reduction of open space, if it was a development such as that to the north, to where, yes, there are multiple tenants, multiple buildings, and it's all one larger parking lot that they could then share.
is the intent to get more parking spots in? Is that?
The intent is potentially to have the required amount of parking met, and then also connectivity. So when you look at the Starbucks, Chick-fil-A, Murphy situation, you cannot really successfully go between all three of those without having to exit out the lot, get onto the main, sidewalk there on the drive aisle, then walk to the next and up and in. So the intent with having this, it's more of the connectivity of allowing the developments to actually interconnect and have better pedestrian access.
Okay. And then a very specific question, I guess, on the part changed for letter C towards the bottom of that page. We added something about, so it's listed under the downtown commercial developments. And then it says for developments where the primary use is residential.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have downtown commercial developments that are primarily residential?
So that one is more of for the CMU and RMU districts, so both of those districts allow for both commercial or residential.
Yeah, typically like above the commercial.
I mean, that, or you could have, single family attached within those districts. As it currently sits. So when the primary use of that, let's just call it the RMU district, the residential mixed use, is residential, then that's where they have to meet that percentage open space. But if it's the primary use is commercial, then that is where they can get that, the difference down to 20%.
And how is that determined?
That would be determined when we get plating or a site plan in, if there is more residential square footage or
So
residential
it's,
unit.
so it's square footage.
It would
Okay.
be, it would be determined based on the product type that we get in.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Do I have?
Mayor, this is a public hearing.
Oh, okay. Will you call for a public hearing, Melissa?
Yes, the public hearing for ordinance number 13 is opened at 7:24, and I don't have anyone signed up.
Okay, anybody not sign up? Okay. Do you want to close some public hearing?
No comment, so the public hearing is closed at 7:24.
Okay. Ordinance number 13, series 2022, an ordinance amending chapter 16, article 6 of the Timnath Land Use Code. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Ordinance number 13, series 2022, an ordinance amending chapter 16, article 6 of the Timnath Land Use Code. Resolution number 41, series 2022, a resolution authorizing budget amendment and contract for broadband services. Brian.
Thank you, Mayor. This agenda item basically breaks into two topics. One is how we approach the broadband project. Right now, we've been working on it through the master planning studies, and we're kind of taking that to the next level. So staff is recommending that we move broadband from master planning into an actual capital improvement project. It kind of follows the line of the way we've approached other things, like when we were doing these buildings, we did a master planning study for buildings in the town that happened under master planning studies. And then as we did each individual project, they became capital projects. The second piece of the action in front of you is authorizing the funds for that capital project for this year, specifically a contract to further the work that Ditesco has done for us. We had a very productive work session through about a month ago, and we're kind of just following directly on those steps. Happy to answer any questions that anybody has about that, if there are any.
What a presentation.
Well, we've been here for a little while, so I just wanted to err on the side of brevity.
I appreciate that, Brian.
Mark, I do have a comment if.
Yeah, go.
So it's really more of a comment. So when I first got the packet and I was reading it and I read the title of the resolution, it makes me feel like we are entering into a contract to provide broadband services. So I was kind of wondering if somebody else is just looking at our list of resolutions, if they're going to see that rather than like the contract for broadband planning or something like that. And I know that's a minor thing, but when I first read it, I was like, what services?
Good point.
Yes, we are not making that jump right now. So I apologize for that. I'll be more clear in the titles next time.
But should we change that?
If no one else cares, then I don't care, but that's just what I picked up on when I first
We could
saw it.
change it to for broadband planning services. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I had the same response, Lisa.
Lori, did you say you had the same response?
Yeah, I would prefer if we change the title so that it shows what we're actually doing.
So no further comment. I'm going to say resolution number 41, series 2022, a resolution authorizing a budget amendment and contract for broadband planning services with amended to say that.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, resolution number 41, series 2022, a resolution authorizing budget amendment and contract for broadband planning services has been approved unanimously. Discussion items. Brian, you're up again.
I am. I'm stacked at the back of the meeting here. Let me get. So we wanted to just have a little bit of a discussion about the Wild Wing Park. We have gone through the first phases of the master planning study. We did a programming analysis. We did some outreach. We had an open house and we had an online survey. The results of those are kind of detailed in the packet. My touchscreen is not responding at all. So. It's always new here. It's great. So we did do an open house and an online survey. The open house was well attended. We did coincidentally schedule the open house for the same time there was a Wild Wing Metro District meeting. So we had a little bit of a captive audience for the Wild Wing group. We had the open house out here in the lobby, and then they had their Metro District meeting in the community room. So we just kind of stationed somebody down the hall directing people if they were early to come down and participate. So we did have a good number of people participate that came in solely for the open house. And then we did a similar online poll for anybody who wasn't able to attend. We were very diligent in trying to make those options and the way you responded in the open house and the way you responded on the online poll the same, so that we would get good feedback. We also did scrub the online data and find, I would say, about 10% that we found to be stuffing the ballot box, I would say. If you came from the same IP address, within a minute of each submittal with the same exact voting requirements on the same device, we kind of called some of those out so that we were just, trying to have the equal representation. So we took those survey results and we grouped them into 3 categories as are outlined in the memo. The first tier is the things that were kind of on that top grouping. The second tier is kind of in the middle. And then the third tier is the things that were kind of at the bottom of those rankings. I'm not going to go through each individual one of them. They were in the packet, and hopefully everybody had time. I'm happy to, does anybody have any questions about the process we went through, the survey results or those results in general? Okay. So then we took those results and we did 4 concept master plans. Each one of the master plans included the tier 1 amenities. And then we moved kind of the tier 2 amenities in and out to kind of get some variation in the plans. We presented all of those plans to the pros committee, and that was Lisa's first meeting as our pros committee liaison. And I think we had a very robust discussion about each concept. We've summarized kind of those discussions in the staff report as well. Lisa, did you think there was anything that we needed to add based on those discussions?
No, I think that was pretty good.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. So there was pros and cons from each concept, which is what we would expect. Generally, when we go through this process, we end up with a master plan that has elements of each one of these. So I don't think that we're not tied to any one of these concepts, but we want to just get any kind of feedback that you have about them. I can walk through each one, or if you guys want to just give me any comments you have about the concepts, we can go either way there.
I think we're okay with I got a list of comments, and I'm sure everybody else probably does too. So for one, I'll go ahead and start out. First off, I thought the comments that Pross did were excellent. I liked them. There's not one that I disagreed with and stuff. I thought they did great. I did agree with moving the trucks to the existing parking lot as opposed to putting them in the middle of the park and stuff like that. So I like the idea of getting them off. On the side is fine, but not in the middle of the park. I'd be pleased with any of concept 1, 2, or 3. I wasn't a big fan of 4, but 1, 2, and 3, I definitely can. I sort of agree with the person. It'd be nice not to have dog parks, but I think 85% of the people in Wild Wing probably have a dog. And so I'd suggest that we keep the dog park. I like the long run that is on like concept 2. And maybe you could do a banjo where you've got sort of where they can go around, and then, because I know we've had a number of residents say that they'd like to have it, be able to throw the ball and that kind of thing. So I like the idea that you got this big long run on 3, and you sort of do on 4, but I didn't like 4 anyway. So, so I like the idea on 3 on, or 3 on, or 2 on that. I'm sorry, 2 on that. I think everybody knows I coach competitive baseball, national teams and stuff. I am not a fan of putting a fence in, even though, kids like a fence and stuff. But if you take the fence out, you encourage people to use the outfield and stuff as picnic areas and stuff like that. So I'm if you're going to put in a ballpark, I wouldn't put in a fence. It just limits the use of that space. And I'd have to say, we went to nationals once and they had no fences on any of the ball fields. And this was 13s. Now, once you get older, but see, once you get to 15, they're going to be playing on the high school and mid-school fields. They aren't going to be playing on our fields. They're going to be playing on those because they're going to be in Legion or something like that. So I don't think you need fences.
Yeah.
That's long-winded, sorry. And that's all I had. I thought it was well thought out. I liked your process. I liked how you staged the top ones and put them in there. If anything, maybe you put too many in there, and maybe take out 1 or 2 of the bottom ones, just because it's crunched. I mean, there's an obvious, and I don't care if there's a skate park or not, but there's an obvious break there between tennis courts and skate parks. And there's actually another obvious break between food truck and tennis courts. So, that's for guys smarter than me, but it's, I think the concept, the design, it's cool. It's probably past due a couple of years, and so I'm all for let's get on it.
Brian, if I'm following the amenities and the different concepts right, basically, if you put in the baseball field, what you give up is tennis courts. Am I seeing that right? Tennis courts and maybe some, quote unquote, officially designated green space. The baseball field's arguably some green space, but.
Yeah, that seems
That's what you're
right.
swapping out.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there could be other things that get swapped out if there was a strong case for tennis, but yeah, the way the concept's laid out, that they were kind of a swap in and out.
Okay. I mean, I know I've certainly heard from around the community that there's not a lot of places to do any kind of baseball. I certainly favor at least getting some kind of pop-up dugout kind of thing, like I know I've seen over in one of the Windsor parks, at least that as a minimum. And yeah, I mean, I certainly like the general direction that all your concepts are going. I think, Lisa, you've done good work with your committee on these concepts. But yeah, that was just my only question. I like the general direction and like that you're taking the community's input as your priority targets there.
We are working on getting a backstop at the Timnath Community Park as well. That should go in this fall. I tried to get it in.
Thank you for that. I know I've been asking for a little while.
It's surprising, like we've been having problems finding a fence. We had 2 good bids that we've been using, but we're trying to get a 3rd bid to get the purchasing policy. And we just have had like 3 people say, yeah, we'll get you a number. And then we wait for like a couple of weeks and they just won't get us a number. So
Oh, yeah. And that might be helpful for seeing really how popular something like that would be as we finalize plans on this too. So.
I really appreciate all the effort on this, especially the Prost committee. Just really outstanding work thinking through this. I would favor baseball. So at least as far as my 2 cents go, I'd like to see us incorporate that. I've been following the story in Berthoud about their adaptive park that they're raising money for. And they have a family out there with some children that have some physical disabilities. And they're working real hard to make that playground a reality. And, kind of in the interests of accessibility and inclusiveness, I wonder if that's something that maybe we could look at. I don't know that we have anywhere right now in Timnath, kind of designated, purposefully adaptive park facility. And so whether it's Wild Wing or something else, I think that would be something that would be important to introduce into the conversation. So I just ask that be considered.
I think that's a good comment. The Wild Wing area is small. I mean, it's fairly small, but I like Robert's idea of there's lots of space over in the Timnath Community Park that maybe we could put that, towards the end of the parking lots over there and put something like that in.
We do have some adaptive play elements in the phase 1 of the community park. And then we actually, when that phase went in, we had some poured in place surfacing the blue, and then we had mulch there. The mulch was a constant challenge with the wind blowing it out and things like that. So we went back and resurfaced all of that so that the whole playground was accessible. But we can definitely, I think, there's elements here that we can incorporate into the general playground design to make sure that's inclusive rather than having a special area focused for that.
Yeah, I think that's a good comment. Luke, sorry.
Yep. As a new council member, where will the water come for the park?
So we have a non-potable water or irrigation system out there currently that we would just add on to. Actually, these improvements will decrease our water usage because right now we're watering the entire footprint of the park as turf. And so as we add other things in there, that will just decrease our total water usage.
Thank you. Do you have any concerns about the dog run being so close to the entrance that's off the road, or is there? I like the idea that Mark said that it's long. I just didn't know if there's any concerns around.
It would be completely fenced with a fence similar to what we have at the community park. So I don't think that proximity is challenging. I mean, what we're working with right now is the bubble level diagram. So there's a lot of thought and deliberation that goes into kind of that next step. Okay. But we want to make sure that we have a buffer from the sidewalk. So if you're walking on the sidewalk, you're not kind of like right next to those dogs who are playing there. So, keeping an appropriate amount of space there. I think that, we'll have at least 4-foot fence there. If your dog is jumping the 4-foot fence, the dog probably doesn't belong in the dog park.
Okay. Thank you.
And I like how they moved it away from the residences so that a bunch of barking dogs aren't outside somebody's bedroom window.
In all the concepts, we really tried to put the more loud, active elements on the east side of the park and keep the passive elements as much as possible on the west side of the park. And then we'll increase the buffering, just like we did at Timnath Community Park. There's a Metro District track there. We'll increase the buffering along there to kind of give some separation between those active use areas.
So I just want to make a comment too. So as Brian mentioned, that was my first meeting with the Prost Committee, and they were amazing to work with and had a lot of good information. I just want to highlight some of the takeaways that I think, or pieces of the conversation that kind of came up over and over. The baseball fields came up over and over, and it was talked about as a potential moneymaker because apparently there is a strong need for fields. But because of that, it kind of came back to, it wasn't listed as a top, as something that a lot of people wanted. And they felt that if we were using it to kind of rent it out, then it defeats the purpose of us having it anyway, for the community members. I'm always in support of the green space that can then be converted into a baseball field or something like that for the younger kids. But that could also be just field. The field at the community park is used all the time. The dog park came up a few times. Someone mentioned that, I want to say it was Boulder, has some kind of municipal code or something that allows dog owners to kind of apply for this. I don't even remember the terms they use, but basically allowing you to get something that your dog can wear around their collar that says that they can be off leash. That has come up, especially in Wild Wing. If you all remember, we've gotten comments that people want to be able to have their dogs in the field. And then we talked about how if you go to the community park, you're more likely to see loose dogs in the field part than you are at the dog park. I'm not saying which way I feel, but that was a comment that came up. And I think a few of the members liked the idea and wanted to look into what Boulder does. And it looks like Matt might actually have information on it,
Yes,
potentially.
We did. We looked into it, and it's called Green Tag, I think is the title. We actually had the Humane Society look into it as well, and they recommended not going that route because of the management side. There's multiple issues. One is it's a kind of an honor system. You have to go take a class and prove that you've taken this class, and then go through, you submit your information online. And then when you have this green tag, and you have to keep it up to date. And so it becomes an honor system almost to the same point as it would be just having your dog off leash in the first place. And then if there were any incidents that actually happen, the person whose dog is off the leash is the one ultimately that has the responsibility of keeping their dog under control. So it ends up actually back in almost the same space it would be whether you had the program or not had the program. So there's some reluctancy from the Humane Society on that front, but we did look into it. And if the council wants to go down a path like that, we can certainly explore it some more and work with the Humane Society and see what recommendations they might have. But wanted to put that out there.
Thanks for the update there. And then the last thing that people kind of talked about was the community garden being closer to the parking lot, as well as, if you can see in the picture that there's those homes that are right across. Those are the patio homes. So those would be people that potentially couldn't have their own gardens. So that was one of the things that the pros liked, was kind of having easy access for people to drive up, as well as potentially for people that might be in some of those patio homes that might use that space as well.
Take a look, and I heard, I'm for the baseball field too, so I'm not trying to kibosh it, but I don't think anyone pays rent for baseball fields here. I think the baseball, at least when I was president of the Baseball Association for 6 years, I know we never paid a dime for ball fields. We had to pay for maintenance and for lining them and the bases, but as far as the ball field goes, we didn't have to pay anything for those. Now that could have changed. I haven't coached for 10 years, so I'm not sure how it is now, but the only ones that would lease it is the Youth Baseball Association.
And that's what they were talking about, was for the youth baseball. Fort Collins Baseball Club, I think, was brought up as potentially one. So I don't have a strong, I'm not siding on either side, but that was just kind of
before you think, okay, we're going to get money for it.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
I think the majority of people were more on the idea of baseball ranked low on the survey.
I would just also make sure we emphasize that any money-making opportunities from amenities at the park, I think we should be way down our list of reasons for what we want to do. And frankly, I don't see any way rent for our baseball field would pay for even just the construction of it. So I hope and with the baseball, like I'm with you in terms of it's lower tier 2. And so it's kind of that balance of, are we trying to help people that
feel, we're trying to get everybody represented, everybody's interests represented. And I know we are putting tennis courts at the community park. And so we're trying to balance all the amenities available in the park. I don't have a strong opinion on it. I think the discussions you're having, like I said, in the pros committee are good ones. So.
Does that give you good input?
It does, yeah. And the last thing I would say is that this is obviously going to be a phased construction project. So I think as we get a final layout and bring a final master plan back to you guys, we'll look at the phasing as well. And maybe what we'll try to do is try to get more of the top priority tier amenities in that first phase. And then as we move into a second phase, maybe we can revisit, we can kind of have earmarked space for some of these things and then kind of revisit exactly what we want to do in those areas.
Okay.
Oh, and we will be we'll have a public open house where we show all these boards and get input from the public.
Get input and stuff too. So, and I'm going to look to you guys for a second, but I would think this would be one of our priorities is this park. It's been on the drawing boards for 4 or 5 years. So I would think this would be one of our priorities. And so on the budget, I'd like to maybe see us try to prioritize this. So it's fine to phase it, but let's maybe get 3/4 of it done, not half or something like that.
We actually, I think we'll have a very robust first phase of this, even with a lower general financial commitment, because there's an existing irrigation system with a clock. Half of the park is already irrigated. We're not going to be touching it. We have an existing parking lot. We'll probably want to upgrade the parking lot at some point, but I wouldn't say that would be a good use of our dollars in the first phase. So, if you look at the community park, grading, parking lot, and irrigation are 3 of those really big ticket items that we've already got taken care of here.
We don't have to do, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to have a much more amenity-focused first phase in this park.
Good.
Mark, I agree with you on that piece. As much as we can get done, I'm in support of. And the last thing I forgot to mention was the house that was on there. The house that's on that property was discussed with the pros. And I think what I got as the vote of the pros was we don't want to keep it for the sake of keeping it if there's not a purpose. No one was in love with the idea of holding on to it for that reason. So
yeah, we need to do a little bit more analysis on it. We've had other people interested, like a while ago, and maybe they're still interested, or they were. The soccer group that leases the field wanted to put some offices out there, but there was a substantial investment required by the town to bring that from a residential status to a commercial building status.
I'll tell you what, at City Park, Fort Collins City Park, there's a house there. The Fort Collins Youth Baseball uses it as their office. They never changed anything. I mean, just still bedrooms and stuff like that there, and a living room that's sort of their opening. And it would let baseball players have a place to store their equipment. It would let soccer players have a place to store their stuff so that they're not having to always change around. And is it the perfect ideal building? No, but if it's safe, I wouldn't do much with it. And it's a lot better to sort of keep it than tear it down and not give these different organizations the opportunity to sort of store their stuff there instead of having to haul it around.
Yeah, I think we'll probably have Safe Built do an analysis of it.
Yeah.
Just to see what their
I think that's a great
opinion
idea.
is, and we'll probably the one difference between that, I know that the Fort Collins baseball house you're talking about. One of the challenges we run into is this house has a second story, so that pushes us into a whole bunch of other criteria. But we might be able to just say that the second story is off limits for those commercial uses or something like that. So
board it up.
Yeah. Or maybe it's just like storage or something like that.
Yeah.
That doesn't require that access.
Okay. Good discussion, everybody. Anything further you want, Brian? Okay. Anything further, Aaron? Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Oops, I'm sorry. What? Oh, shoot, I forgot. Sorry about that. So we've got a letter of resignation from Lori. And so we need a motion to accept that resignation. We can have a discussion too, but anybody want to discuss anything? So could I have a motion to accept her resignation?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resignation is accepted. Thank you for reminding me. Any further now? Okay, could I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Hey, Melissa,